The participants are being admitted. Please kindly hold on. I request the participant to mute, not be muted. If you want to switch on your video, you can go on. Please make sure that you have a good dress code and proper background.
For the ID.
The participants are being admitted. Please hold on. Hello, madam. Good morning. I didn't get you. I didn't get you. Okay, okay. Yeah. Okay, okay. I will stop. Okay, okay. Understood. Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay, 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 madam. I remove the video. Okay, okay. What the fuck? No, no, I request participant to mute their video. Please mute your videos. Thank you. I request participants to mute your video for smooth conduction of this webinar. Please mute your video. எல்லாரும் உங்க வீடியோவை மியூட் பண்ணிக்கங்க. I request participant to mute their video.
Ramya.
I request the participants to mute their video. We are going to start the session. Mute your video.
Sati?
Sir, good morning. Giri sir, good morning.
Yeah. Sati, do you have the option of muting all the videos?
Yes, it means muted. Everybody is muted.
Yes. So now shall we start the program?
Yes, yes.
Right.
Dear participants, thank you for your for the response. Now the Zoom is full. The Zoom column is full. Now you can take the YouTube stream to view if you want. It has been shared. You can tell your friends also. The Zoom column is full. So sir, shall we start this session? It's time.
We are almost a little moving away from the time. You can start.
Yes, okay. Good morning, dear participants. On behalf of Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute, Faculty of General and Adapted Physical Education and Yoga, I wholeheartedly welcome you all for this international webinar series, session 1 of the Inclusive Adapted Physical Education. At the outset, to seek the blessings of the Almighty, I request Amarnath Bhagavatarana to sing the prayer song.
गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा तिरुवरुள் புரிவாய் गुरुदेवा तिरुवरुள் புரிவாய் गुरुदेवा கருணையின் உருவே கற்பகத்தருவே கருணையின் உருவே கற்பகத்தருவே காருண்யசீலா கலியுக வரதா காருண்யசீலா கலியுக வரதா போற்பதம் பணிந்தேன் சத்குருதேவா நற்கதி எனக்கு நீ தருவாய் குருதேவா ஜெய குருதேவா திருவருள் புரிவாய் குருதேவா அன்னையும் நீயே தந்தையும் நீயே ஆதியும் நீயே அந்தமும் நீயே சாரதை நாதா சகலமும் நீயே சரணடைந்தோமே உனதருள் வேண்டி குருதேவா ஜெய குருதேவா புரிவாய் குருதேவா திருவருள் புரிவாய் குருதேவா. जय श्री गुरु महाराज जी की जय.
Thank you, Anna. Now, I request Dr. R. Giridharan, Head of the Department, Faculty of General and Yoga, Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute, to deliver his inaugural address.
Thank you, Dr. Satyamurthy. First, my humble pranams to Revered Swami Garishnanandji Maharaj, Administrative Head, Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute, Coimbatore campus, for giving me permission to organize this international webinar series on inclusive adapted physical education. And Revered Brahmachari Ajara Chaitanya Maharaj, Administrative Head, RKMVERI Coimbatore campus, most respected Dr. N. Mutayana, Dean, Rehabilitation, School of Rehabilitation Science and Education and Physical Education, and the experts of this series, webinar series, respected Dr. Susana Dillon, respected Dr. Linda Hillengenbred, and respected Sri Padmini Channapragada, are the experts of this 3 days webinar series, and respected staff members of GAPI faculty and the students and the distinguished attendees. A very good morning to all. I'm so happy this fine morning meeting you all through this video conferencing mode. On behalf of the management and the staff members of the GAPI, I welcome all the dignitaries present in this webinar organized by the Faculty of General and Adapted Physical Education and Yoga. Before getting into the theme of the webinar, I would like to share a few things about the faculty. The Faculty of General and Adapted Physical Education and Yoga was established in the year 2007. It is the second off-campus faculty center of Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational Research Institute of Coimbatore campus. It is aimed to strengthen the services and academic program in the field of disability management. It is one of the 4 major thrust area being identified by the university since its inception. For your information, the universities, whatever the faculty departments, been established with the aim of merging the gap where there is a need for to address those. Especially in the disability management, in our Coimbatore off campus, we have a faculty of disability management and special education, and for in sports, the faculty of general and adapted physical education and yoga. The faculty of GAPI offers teacher training program of BPEd, MPEd, that is Bachelor of Physical Education and Master of Physical Education, which are duly approved by National Council for Teacher Education. It is also offers various programs from the UG level, that is Bachelor of Science in Physical Education, Health Education and Sports, to the doctoral degree level. The main aim of the faculty is to promote adapted physical education in yoga among the physical education professionals, providing them the opportunity to become a qualified physical education professionals possessing the knowledge of adapted physical education activities and some basic knowledge of classification of disabilities, and mainly inculcating the positive attitudes to work with or go along with the person with disabilities in sports. Today, I would like to show you some of the extension activities of our Faculty of General and Adapted Physical Education and Yoga. So let me share my screen. Dr. Satyamurthy, I hope that this video is able to see the audience.
Yes, it's clear, sir. It is clear.
Yes, thank you. Dear participants, this is one of the unique extension activities being done by our faculty of General and Adaptive Physical Education and Yoga since 2007. This is one concept of unified sports where it is being taken from the Special Olympics. The unified is nothing but combining the children with intellectual disability along with the partners they call of normal in a peer groups. They combine to have a meaningful inclusion. Here in our faculty, our teacher trainees were being trained in all the physical activities and they have been sent to various schools where there is no physical education trainees or teachers to teach these children, and we request them to be there for another 15 days to have a teaching practice, learn by practice. So these teacher trainees will teach them for 15 days and bring back them to the universities to have a one day where they can experience with all together. Here I can show you this activities is synchronized physical and rhythmic activities where you can see the girls are drawn a wonderful column therapy. So here I would like to stress that one column of people were all children with intellectual disability or adjacent to them or all person with able body is a partner where there are own relation or the friends in the community. There are various activities like free hand exercises and all low manipulative skills like throwing, catching, target throws. Along with all these motor skills and fundamental movements and patterns, they are being given an exposure to various physiotherapy assessment, therapy centers like physiotherapy, and you can see that they are being exposure to the musical therapy. Along with the partners, they move some movement therapies, the art therapies, where these children are being truly engaged. Your phone has no signal, so I can't help you with that. Truly engaged in the art therapies. Now you can see the partner is helping the child with physical disabilities. And we request all our teacher trainees in our university to coordinate to have a successful in this program. Now let us show you, this is another extension activity. Every year we used to conduct various adapted games of nationally popular sports and internationally popular sports which have been recognized by the Paralympics and Special Olympics. Here you can see adapted cricket for paraplegic athletes. They can sit and play, and there are some rules being modified. All our teacher trainees of our institution being exposed to all the games. They've been trained, and most of the physical education teachers, they are all working in many special education sectors and institutions. This is a nationally popular sports of volleyball. It's played in there's a volleyball being played in a 2-dimension where this ball will travel below the net, and it is a 30 centimeter from the ground level, and there will be the different formats. So this will be modified especially for a person with visual impairment. And these children from various districts of Tamil Nadu, they brought together, and for 3 days, we are giving them the opportunity to play, and we encourage them with the trophies and medals. And for the girls, we used to motivate them to go for the Boshi game. This, we request our teacher trainees to get involved in the special education schools, and we do offer the training in our own Vidyalaya. We have 4 special education institutions where nearly 100 to 120 children being trained every day in our university campus. Most of them already they have participated in the national sports. Not only for the events for the person with intellectual disability or a person with visual impairment or a hearing impairment, we do offer many sports for persons with physically challenged. And recently, we organized an international camp of Indian camp. The Indian wheelchair basketball team came here for 15 days to get a complete training and with a dedicated coaches and wonderful infrastructures being used from our Ramakrishna Mission Vidyalaya, Coimbatore campus. And they have participated in the Paralympic Olympic, and they got out from the preliminary round. These are some of the extension activities being conducted by our Faculty of General and Adapted Physical Education and Yoga. Along with this, there are many programs which has been government been recognized to organize a district level or state level differently abled sports meet. So we do organize lot of competitions, experiences and exposure for the person with the disabilities along with our teacher trainees. Getting into the theme of international webinar series on adapted physical education in inclusive setting, it's a very relevant in the field of disability management. Whatever national policy says that the child with a disability should be provided adapted physical education along with the special education services that he or she receives. Any students with a disability to any type of disability or to any degree of disability should be provided adapted physical education for their development and to lead a healthy lifestyle. Adapted physical education service can be delivered in the general physical education setting or a self-contained one. Sports for the disabled person originally introduced earlier in the form of only a remedial treatment or it is a rehabilitation program. It is not merely because of a fitness or a motivation or a competition nature or any fun. But with the evolution of modern sports, with the help of disability sports organizations like Special Olympics, Paralympics and Deaflympics, they brought many sports. With that, the realm of therapy has changed into more of brought up with the adapted physical activities for the different types of disabled children to get involved. Purpose is purely for an education and for the leisure and fun. Some of the research statistics says that 40% of the people, able-bodied people, are getting involved in a serious in sports. They took participation is around 40% of the people of the general population. Whereas 3% of the disability populations are getting an opportunity or get trained in sports. This differences gives and arises a question, does we Do we give access of the environment, or the knowledge which being shared is only partially for the abled people, or the socialization factors like medical professionals, teachers, athletes, and the sports administrators, do they or lack in giving the awareness or passing the information or giving opportunities or differences in the choice, or do the policy in India still favors only for the able-bodied people? Lot of questions arises. Here, the main thing is the sports participation for the able-bodied people along with the disabled people. It is a big challenge. So there it comes the adapted physical education. It's a simple meaning to say, yeah, adapted physical education is an art and science of developing, implementing, and monitoring a carefully designed instructional program for a learner with a disability based on a comprehensive assessment to give the learner to enrich their skills, to enjoy the leisures, and to enhance their fitness and wellness. So do we have a gift of a society where they accept inclusion, and they do accept the inclusion of disabilities? We have to think about that. Do we have a lack in accommodating the people in the mainstream because of a financial consideration, or a lack of sensitivity or expertise in the field of disability management? It's a time for a change. Within the last 2 decades, the people of our professionals from the physical educations, slowly they're getting involved into the disability sports organization. So there is a tremendous progress is taking place. In one way, we can say the number of sports has been increased, and the access to the sports for the people with all kind of disabilities, and the concept of adapted physical education curriculum being inculcated in the teacher training program and brought inside, and many universities started offering adapted physical education programs in India. More athletes are prepared to compete, and performances have been keep improving. The best athletes been changing from the recreation to the competition level. So, but that is the one which I really love to hear. Accepting the change is really about learning. So it means the teachers who learn from the experience in the same way, they expect their people with giving the task that they've been engaged. With this, keeping in this perspective, accepting the changes and keeping the, as a physical educators and special educators, opening your ears for to be receive the things. So we took this as a to address this problem. We planned to conduct this, and it has came up alive today with a eminent expertise from the Texas women universities we brought inside, and this international webinar is going to deliberate and discuss all the guidelines and the recommendations from whatever the experts been passing out. For us, we should take it and do to our children to come up and to lead a healthy life. So with this, the sincere hope that this international webinar will be a great success. So I thank for all the participants to get benefited.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful inaugural session. Now, let us go for the session. First, introduction of the speaker. Let me introduce the speaker to the participants. So, today's speaker is Dr. Susanna Rocco Dillon. Susanna Rocco Dillon, PhD, is an associate professor of adapted physical education in the Department of Kinesiology at Texas Women's University in Denton, USA. In this capacity, she is involved in professional preparation specific to adapted physical activity at the undergraduate, master's, and doctoral level, including supervising interdisciplinary practicum, providing programming to local PK-12 students with disabilities. Additionally, she is the project director for TW's Project Nexus, a master's level personal preparation grant from the US Department of Education, and TWU's, that is Texas Women University's director for the Multi-Institution Adapted Physical Activity Consortium, that is a doctoral level leadership grant funded by the US Department of Education. In her over 20 years of work in the field of adapted physical activity, her professional activities have also included teaching, coaching in Special Olympics, and work with non-profit organizations, serving individuals with disabilities, and being an advocate for individuals with disabilities. Dr. Dillon has previously served on the board of directors for the National Consortium for Physical Education for Individuals with Disabilities in a variety of capacities, including as the organization's president. Dr. Dillon recently served as a contributing author for the 3rd edition of the Adapted Physical Education National Standards and Revised APENS exam. She also serves on the Alliance for a Healthier Generations Voices for Healthy Kids, Physical Education, Physical Activity Coalition, and represents NCPEID, that is National Consortium for the Physical Education for Individuals with Disabilities, with the National Coalition on Personal Shortages in Special Education and Related Services. To add to her weightage, she has published 3 books, one being the author and 2 the contributing author, and also chapters about 2. Speaking about the research and publications, it is very vast. I am just giving you with a brief. She has published 61 articles in the refereed journals, both national and international, and in that, accepted is 2, in the proceedings 2, 1 national and 1 international, and in the abstracts in the proceeding, she has 10 to her credits. In the conference paper presentation in independent, she has 43 numbers. In the symposium 8, in the podiums 98. I think she goes to call this century. Next, in the poster presentation, she has 80 credentials, and majorly in the funded projects, she has 8 to the credit, and non-funded 6. And especially to the link, the awards, she has 12 acclaimed awards. To highlight one among it is William Hillman Distinguished Service Award, National Consortium for Physical Education for Individuals with Disabilities. So I am very happy to introduce Dr. Dillon, and I kindly request Dr. Dillon to continue this session. Dr. Dillon.
Good day, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
Yes,
I'm going to go ahead.
You are clear in audio and video. Now the session is yours. The participants are eagerly waiting for your session, ma'am. Please kindly carry on. Thank you.
Okay. So it advanced here. Good day, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. As mentioned, I'm Dr. Susanna Rocco Dillon from Texas Women's University, and I'm going to speak with you today about autism spectrum disorder and strategies for PE professionals that facilitate and promote inclusive practice. Before I get started, I'd like to extend a special thank you to Dr. Giridharan for inviting me to this fantastic opportunity, and Ms. Shri Padmini Chanampragada for recommending me for this talk. So as just highlighted, I have been a, as you would say, pre-primary through secondary education adapted physical educator and Special Olympics coach, the president of my national consortium, which allowed me to go to Washington, D.C. and advocate on behalf of individuals with disabilities. Much of that advocacy was mentioned earlier in the introduction to this actual session. I've been a contributing author to APHENS, and what that means is our Adapted Physical Education National Standards serve as the standards by which we identify what adapted physical educators in the United States should know and be able to do to provide adapted physical education services. As a researcher and a teacher educator, I've also been involved in a variety of different projects. And in that bottom picture there, I would probably be remiss if I didn't also mention that I'm a proud mother of these two wonderful humans who have also served as peer models and as volunteers in many disability sport activities along my side. I hope to share some of the knowledge I've gleaned through these experiences with you in this presentation. I feel very fortunate to be able to speak with you today about physical education, teacher education programs, such as the one at the RK mission there, and facilitate wonderful opportunities for and with individuals with autism spectrum disorder. In preparing for this unique opportunity, we, myself, and Dr. Hilgenbrink and Ms. Shri Padmini Chanampragada acknowledge the challenges that are faced by individuals with disabilities, including those with autism spectrum disorder, their families, teachers, and then other service providers. And really the impact that that has on physical activity programming, including physical education. That said, I'd like to share with you multiple strategies that can be taught within PEAT programs and that can be implemented by those teachers in primary and secondary level programs, as well as at home with parents of students with disabilities to improve their outcomes. I was pleased to hear from Dr. Giridharan of the efforts of the RK mission and the progressive PEAT program that's being implemented there. This leadership within the field will enable physical educators to work more effectively with their students with ASD, as well as with the special educators and parents that may be supporting their programming. And as we'll discuss, this vision for a more inclusive practice in India's schools will support all learners, not just those with autism spectrum disorder. My talk today will address the infusion model within PEAT programs, teaching strategies that can be facilitated with PEAT majors to support students with ASD in physical education, including the discussion of evidence-based practices. So when we talk about adapted physical education, what is the reality facing our physical educators specific to students with disabilities?
Dear Madam.
Yes.
Madam, have you started sharing or not yet, Madam?
Yes, and it's not showing you, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me come back in here and hit share screen again.
Yes, madam.
Do you see it now?
Yeah, yes, I'm getting. We are getting, madam. Getting, yeah.
Okay, very good. All right,
Can go for full view. Can go for. Excuse me, ma'am. Can go for full view, please. Full view.
Is it not full view?
Now it's in share view. Now we can go for full view, please. Yeah.
I have full view on my screen. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yes. It may take 1 or 2 seconds. No problem.
Okay.
Yes,
Tell me
ma'am,
when you can
carry
see
on.
it.
Yeah, you can carry on. Thank you. You can carry on.
Very good. Okay. So let me catch up here. And I believe we are here. So the talk today will include infusion of adapted physical activity content within PEAT programs, and then strategies to support students with ASD and physical education, including evidence-based practices. So when we look at PEAT programs and we look at the reality that is awaiting our specialists as they enter the field, what is that reality? What we know is that more students with disabilities are being integrated into general physical education or GPE classes than in the past, that physical educators continue to report inadequate or woeful preparation for teaching those students, and that the inclusion movement, while poised to provide multiple benefits and opportunities for students with and without disabilities, may result in students with disabilities being placed into physical education classes without appropriate support or consideration. We also know that physical educators face multiple teaching challenges that include, but are not limited to, the teaching of students with disabilities. Here in the United States, we are looking at very large class sizes or low equipment, and a good number of other challenges each day. And I'm sure that physical educators in India face similar challenges. Globally, as I said before, more students with disabilities are integrated into the general education setting each year. Here in the United States, it's estimated that 95% of all students with disabilities are being educated in general education classrooms, including general physical education. And if you consider that, that is students who are 2 standard deviations below the mean with regard to motor performance. So what are some strategies that PEAT leaders can employ to improve teacher education programs so that our graduates are really prepared to teach students with disabilities in their classrooms? The first strategy that I would recommend is to be infusing content about adapted physical education across the PEAT curriculum. Here in the United States, we have a history of including a single course in adapted physical education within most PEAT programs. In this model, physical educators complete their full program with only one class that is aimed to prepare them to teach adolescence and young adulthood across an entire physical education curriculum and to students with a wide range of disabling conditions. This is the reality that awaits them in their real world teaching context. According to DePauw and Gakrop and Kowalski, we can and should deconstruct this one course system by infusing or systematically weaving into our PEAT curriculum information about adapted physical education in skill, activity, and lecture courses. I have examples here listed from the MPED program at RK Mission. And you can see from the sample courses that there's some that would be infused and others that could be potentially added. These would always be, of course, added as appropriate to the physical education teaching context in India. So, of course, that could be infused with the test measurement and evaluation in physical education course, as well as the yoga course. Some others we'll look at more specifically as I discuss infusion further. So there are 3 levels to the infusion model that can be implemented at the post-secondary level or the university level. The first level is initial awareness. And this really involves adding some selected learning experiences and knowledges to existing content. So maybe we add a guest lecture, video, webinars, readings, etc. For example, in an exercise physiology course, when exercise heart rate is discussed, the course instructor could include a discussion on the impact of low blood pressure and low heart low exercising heart rate on physical activity and participation after a spinal cord injury. Inclusion, on the other hand, in this context only with regard to infusion, and could include things like participation in a webinar series, such as the one I'm going to speak about in a second, or a discussion of curricular adaptations inside of a pedagogy or methodology course. One of the examples I might use for inclusion might be in a sport or a pedagogy course to include Blaze Sports webinar series, which is called A Deeper Dive into Adaptive Sports and Recreation. And these three webinars in the series are focused on adaptive sports for persons who have limb loss, cerebral palsy, and spinal cord injury. So adding those components to an existing course might be a way to include additional content. Infusion is kind of the last level or the most involved level. And infusion really looks to include specific knowledge and applications in major coursework. This could include making modifications to physical education programming in a methods course, or teaching children with disabilities, as mentioned earlier by Dr. Giridharan, out in the field in authentic teaching placements. As I can see from the MPED program, there are multiple courses where this level of infusion could actually occur. Implementing this infusion model within the PEEP program involves a good number of components. First and foremost would be a commitment to the approach across the school or the university, as well as across the PEEP program. It also means that the faculty need to come together to determine what's the level of understanding that we expect from all of our PE majors, and what's the specific knowledge we need our majors to know before they exit our program. We also have to match new content to existing coursework and develop some sort of an implementation strategy. You may have there at RK Mission a handful of experts who could then go to experts in other areas and implement new content. We would also need to develop an implementation strategy, and I would recommend that that be slow and steady. Perhaps pick one course each semester to try to infuse a bit of content or extra information. There should also be specific plans for how the PEEP faculty would expect majors to be accountable for the content, and then a way for them to, for you all as faculty, to periodically review the content and make sure that the program is being effective. There are some flaws or some potential downfalls to this model, and that includes buy-in from faculty as opposed to dissension for having to teach content that maybe isn't their area of expertise. Potential changes in faculty and instructional staff that impact familiarity with the content. So if you have someone who's been teaching the course semester after semester and that person leaves, does the new person coming in have the ability to step in and carry forward with the content? Potential changes in course delivery. We've definitely seen this with COVID. Today is one of the benefits of COVID, because we've all gone to an online platform and looked to international as well as national sources for further educational opportunities. But moving to virtual learning spaces may challenge the adoption of infusion. There's also issues associated with incomplete implementation of the model, where you only have a handful of people that actually adopt the content and portray to the majors, the PEEP majors, that this is important information that should be known by all. So some final thoughts on infusion. As faculty and institutions of higher education, we are always going to be the folks who are responsible for ensuring that our graduates are prepared to teach not only the students who are gifted or more talented movers, but those who may have difficulty in the physical education setting, learning our content, or participating in our programming. Infusion offers a viable option for addressing the needs of our students in their real world context. And by students, I mean our PEAT majors. It also means, is a means by which we might be able to kind of bridge that research to practice gap. As we get new research, how do we bring that into our classrooms and help share that information with our future professionals? Okay, so a little bit about infusion for the who are looking to integrate more content or further develop and refine the PEAT program. But then also, how do we, with the courses that are existing, how do we bring best practices forward and prepare our PEAT majors with information that will help them be a stronger teacher? So first, I would say we look at the literature. And from the literature, we know that physical education provides benefits to students with and without disabilities, such as improvements in motor development, physical fitness, opportunities for social interaction, etc. It also can increase acceptance of individual difference if taught correctly. This increased understanding and acceptance of individual differences may play a critical role as school-age children mature, particularly our individuals with autism spectrum disorder, and transition into their communities as adults with autism spectrum disorder. Communities that are better prepared to receive and to be open to students with autism, and particular open to them being physically active members of the community, are keys to addressing the worsening delays in motor development, as well as fitness deficits that we see that increase for individuals with autism over their lifespan. Students with ASD face a good variety of challenges in physical education. They demonstrate growth and fine motor differences that increase as they age. And while they're able to perform common locomotor skills like run, gallop, skip, and perform ball skills like dribble and throw and catch, these skills are often of poor quality and are significantly delayed by the time they reach late childhood, so the end of primary school. In fact, researchers have found that children with ASD are more likely to have some degree of movement impairment than their non-disabled peers. And children with ASD demonstrate difficulties performing complex motor skills requiring significant balance and coordination. Children with ASD have reported individual challenges associated with physical activity participation and their own levels of physical fitness. They've demonstrated that they are very much impacted by the sensory input that comes through in our physical activity settings, such as the young lady here pictured in the photo. She's got her headphones on to try to dampen the loud sounds that are often present in physical activity settings. And individuals with ASD have spoken about their fears of being injured while participating in physical education or in physical activity. Unfortunately, children and youth with ASD have also reported instances of bullying in physical education settings. And as a result of these and some other negative experiences, have often sought exclusion rather than inclusion in physical education programming. As it relates to physical fitness and health, children with ASD are 40% more likely to be obese than the general population of their peers. They demonstrate significant reductions in physical activity with age, so as they get older, they become less physically active, which is further compounded by the fact that their motor skills become more important for physical activity participation as they become adolescents and young adults. Youth with ASD also demonstrate lower levels of physical fitness than their peers, with significantly lower levels of strength than neurotypically developing peers. And they are less active and less motivated to participate in physical education than their neurotypically developing peers. So while our students with ASD program can prepare physical educators to implement effective educational strategies that are supported by evidence-based practices. So because there's no single teaching method that can reach all students or all learners in any one given class, I really feel it's imperative that we employ multiple methodologies to reach everyone. And for this reason, I would recommend beginning the discussion of teaching students with disabilities who have varying learning needs with a discussion about instruction with a discussion about universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. Universal design for learning, or UDL, is a framework that really seeks to optimize teaching and learning through a proactive approach. Proactive meaning that we're doing the thinking and the planning and the decision-making prior to instruction. We are planning for all of the possible learners who might be in our classes and anticipating those needs so that our instruction is not only equitable, but flexible in design. And we're planning for different teaching tools and methodologies to be used in that lesson. It's always an interesting conversation with my undergraduate students and my master's students when we talk about universal design for learning, and I ask, would you stay with the same teaching methodology the entire way through a 50-minute lesson? And sometimes the initial answer is yes. And I say, okay, well, and how would you feel being involved in that lesson if there was no variability? If that wasn't the best methodology for you, would you be lost partway through the lesson? And most of them agree. So that brings us back then to that discussion about how do we vary and how do we employ multiple methodologies in the same lesson so that we can reach the maximum number of learners. Differentiated instruction, while complementary to universal design for learning, is a way for us as teachers to allow the students different ways to show us what they know or what they can do. And it's done during instruction or as the instruction is happening or shortly thereafter. It is not individualized instruction. I want to make sure I'm clear about the two of these. The differentiated instruction would be more like modifications or differentiation in response to what the student needs during our instruction process. Or as the student is engaged in instruction, we realize, oh, that student needs a smaller ball, or they need a lighter hockey stick, or they need a lowered net, whatever it happens to be, but it's usually in the instructional process. And these alterations can be differentiation to the content that we're teaching. Maybe we have to reduce or change the content. It might be changing the process, how we teach it, what order are we teaching things in. It might be the product. Instead of having to complete 15 reps, they only have to complete 10. Or it might be about the environment. What is it in that learning environment that needs to be changed so that the student can be successful? Together, both UDL and differentiated instruction aim to address student need, okay? They also provide access to a quality educational context and content, and they create a learning environment that is supportive and engaging. And finally, with both of these, assessment is central to this framework because we want to make sure that our students are making progress and that we're using feedback in both assessment and feedback in both a summative as well as formative context. So above and beyond UDL and differentiated instruction, I'd like to take a look at evidence-based practices. And evidence-based practices are instructional strategies, interventions, or our teaching programs that have been consistently used and produce positive results when we look at them empirically or when we experimentally test them. Why we should use evidence-based practices. In the United States, educators are required by professional standards and by federal legislation to implement evidence-based practices. And I know from my work with Shri Padmini Champagata that the educational policies in India are very similar in many, many ways to the educational policies here in the United States. So it's my best guess that those professional standards that are being implemented and expected at RK Mission are also expecting that the students that go through those programs or matriculate out of those programs have knowledge of how to use tested and tried instructional practices and strategies, or evidence-based practices. What we know from EBPs, or evidence-based practices, is that because we've tested them empirically, that we know that they produce consistent results. So our teachers who are implementing them would be more effective in teaching and problem solving when challenging behaviors or learning challenges come through. This is why it's important for both the teachers and the learners that evidence-based practices are being used. And overall, at the end of the day, what we really want to do is improve outcomes for learners, and evidence-based practices are known to do that. So specific to autism spectrum disorder, there's a variety of different places that we could look at for evidence-based practices for learners with autism spectrum disorder. We could look at journals, we could look at national organizations or international organizations for evidence-based practices, and we see them published regularly in our professional adapted physical activity journals, special education journals, some public health journals, and educational journals. And the ones that I have identified here have been established by the national centers and national organizations of the National Autism Center and the National Professional Development Center. And these listed here have compelling scientific evidence to suggest that they are evidence-based practices specific to learners with autism spectrum disorder in school or educational contexts. And they include, but aren't limited to, there are more than on the slide, the antecedent package, behavioral package, exercise, modeling, peer training, social stories, self-management, and schedules. And I want to look at a few kind of close up and hopefully shed some light on them. And then if you have questions at the end, be able to answer those for you. So our evidence-based practices that support learners with ASD. The first one I'd like to speak to are antecedent strategies. And these interventions really involve us modifying situations or situational events that typically precede a undesired behavior or a target behavior. These alterations that we make as teachers are focused on increasing the likelihood of success with a desired behavior, and that can be an affective or personal social behavior just as much as it could be a motor behavior. They also might reduce the likelihood of problem behaviors or unwanted behaviors. Interventions falling into this category of research draw from the fields of applied behavior analysis, or ABA, behavioral psychology, and positive behavior support. So some examples that we might include in antecedent strategies would be things like behavior shaping, cueing or prompting, providing choice, and then changing the environment of a task so that the task demands change. I want to say one quick thing about this. When we look at the relationship between the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence or the outcome of the behavior, once the function of a student's challenging behavior is identified, so once we know why a student is acting in a particular way, we need to make sure that we are communicating, that we communicate the need, sorry, let me make it sure I said that correctly. Once the behavior is identified, a more appropriate way to communicate needs to be taught and reinforced. So if we have, for example, a student who is sitting down in the middle of our lesson because they no longer want to participate because the music's too loud or it's too dynamic and too chaotic in the learning environment, once we know that they are attempting to withdraw or dampen the sensory input that's happening, we need to provide them with another way to communicate that so that we don't get that challenging behavior. Let me give you another example. If I have a student who's engaged in a tennis lesson and they're throwing the ball at the floor or at the wall really hard to get a sensory or proprioceptive need met, then we can shape this behavior by providing them with an alternative behavior, like you see in the illustration below. When they're finished with practice, their tennis skill practice, they have the choice to either practice with a friend and volleying the ball back and forth, or practice on his or her own and hitting the ball against the wall. Either way, they're still getting that reinforcement. They have choice in doing it, but it's a much better choice than just randomly throwing the ball at the wall or at the floor to get that reinforcement. I will say this, since we're looking at this example also, where there's a forced choice, sometimes asking students with autism spectrum disorder what they would prefer in an open-ended kind of way is just too overwhelming. We need to provide them with 2 or maybe 3 choices, all of which are acceptable to us as an educator, that still empower the student with the autism spectrum disorder and give them choice in their learning context. And I would say that's a strategy that's good for most every student, right? Give them some selected choices that are compatible with what you need to have happen within the lesson. So some other antecedent strategies that really are beneficial are using the visual environment to help organize and create opportunities for the learner. If the environment is organized to support the learner, then they can function more independently. So doing things like creating patterns that connect the learner to the learning environment and that make sense to the learner are really important. So, for example, putting students into color-coded groups so that they know who they're supposed to be participating with. All of the kids with the red shirts or the red pennies are together versus those who are with the green. It helps them to know where to go and who to practice with. Organizing the environment so that it leads to independence is also very important. Clearly providing boundaries, this is where we need to be, and this is where we don't need to be, is important. It helps organize the students in the space. So whether it's demarcations on the floor or areas of the room that are kind of sectioned off, or even something as simple as asking the students here in the United States, as we would get ready to leave a physical activity programming, we might ask the students to line up kind of by the door to get ready to go back to their classroom. So having a line on the floor and putting a sign there that says line up here gives the student information about where they should go and what they should do when they get there. When you implement strategies that increase independence of the individual with ASD, you'll see hopefully a reduction in those less desirable behaviors because they have an appropriate way of self-managing their own behavior. I'm right in the middle of the right-hand side of the slide. You'll see the take a break sign, and then you'll see what is actually just a manila folder that has some laminated cards that are Velcroed to it. This take a break kit, if you will, can be used together. You might just simply mark a space in the classroom where if a student is feeling overwhelmed and they are recognizing that they need to take a break and self-manage their behaviors, that they have a safe place to go to. So if they head to that area of the room, you know they're taking a break versus just heading off into some other space in the room and disengaging from the activity. That might be perceived as off-task behavior or them being disrespectful. But if they go to the area that says take a break, they're telling you, I need a few moments, I'm going here, it's a safe place, I will rejoin the activity. You could also combine that or pair that with this take a break card schedule where the student has 4 chances or 3 chances, whatever is appropriate for the student, to take a break during your activity programming. And they know that it's safe for them to do that many of times, and with the hope that we would fade that number down to a smaller and smaller number as the student continues to participate in the programming. But all of these things help our students manage their own behaviors, which helps them function more independently. It's also important for us to remember that behavior is communication. For many of our students with autism spectrum disorder, they have very limited expressive language. And so very often they're going to communicate with us through behavior rather than through expressed words. So it's important, regardless of the student's communication competence, that when a student with autism spectrum disorder exhibits a behavior, that we acknowledge and respect that they're communicating with us, and that we watch and listen to what our students are saying to us. Being proactive in observing those behaviors and responding appropriately to those behaviors is really key to having them continue successful participation and independent participation in our programs. So here's some other examples of visual supports that I might recommend. This one on the left-hand side of the screen is actually one that we've used here at TWU in our fitness lessons for children and youth with autism spectrum disorder. It's basically just a yoga mat, and there's markings on the mats themselves on one side that indicate where the student's feet should be placed and where their bottom should go for our abdominal work, our crunches or sit-ups that we were doing. And then when we flip it over, there's base plates, or there's base placements for hands and for feet for the beginning of our yoga sequence, along with the visuals that support each of the poses. So as the students are working through the yoga sequence, they have that visual support right there in front of them to facilitate their participation. You can also see on one of the next slides a few other visual supports, but one of the other ones I'll talk to you about is this I Can. And both of these ideas came to me from some amazing adapted physical educators who've actually built this website that is www.toolkit4pe.com. And this is actually one of their other visuals. One of the things that our students struggle with sometimes are our movement concepts. So fast versus slow, hard pressure or hard effort versus light effort, things of that nature, going under, over, etc. So when we provide them with visuals, such as the visual here on the right side of the screen, they have a better way to connect what we're asking them to do or how we're asking them to move. So do I want to move fast like a bunny rabbit or slow like a turtle? This is another example of a visual support that we've utilized in our physical activity programming at TWU. The item on the left-hand side is a combination of an if-then strategy. So if you do the first thing, then we do another thing, and then you get to do your, so it's 3 different things that they're working on. And then at the bottom, they get to work for a physical activity that's of their choice or their desire. And so, an interest. So you could have 3 different things that you need the student to do, and then the what I'm working for task. And then the numbers across the bottom are the number of trials that the student has to participate in. On the other side of the flipboard is a reminder, if you will. It's a social story about what and where we're going to do in physical education, where we're going to be. Are we going to be inside? Are we going to be outside? What are we going to do? There's a social story that helps remind the student of what's going to happen. And at the bottom is a choice board, if you will, of activities that the student can choose for their reinforcing activity. They can pick from that menu of reinforcing activities and carry it to the front of the clipboard where it says I'm working for, and then place their preferred activity there. So again, there's student choice. There's reminders about what's going to happen and where it's going to happen that are linked to like a social story, as well as a visual schedule. And they have if then or first then strategies embedded. Behavior package is another one of our strategies. And this is really designed to reduce challenging behaviors and then probably more importantly, teach alternative behaviors, okay? Examples include, but are not limited to, chaining or positive reinforcement and token economies. I want to say just a quick thing about reinforcement. It's really important for us to remember that if any behavior is not being reinforced, then it's probably not going to be repeated, okay? By default, if there's any behavior that's happening over and over again or being repeated, then there's probably in some way the student is being reinforced or that behavior is being reinforced, whether it's internally and it's a sensory thing, or somebody on the outside is responding and reacting to that behavior that's reinforcing it, okay? So when we start to manipulate or control those reinforcements, we can start to increase or decrease the behaviors that we're wanting to see or not see. And we'll use those behavior strategies to teach our children or our clients or our students to get what they want in an appropriate way. So that will very often involve us teaching using visual supports like we've just mentioned, using the prompting hierarchy in an appropriate way, using whatever is the lowest level of prompting that we need to elicit the response we need from the student so that we're not over helping them. We want them to be as independent as possible. And then reinforcing the student's successive approximations. The closer they get to it, we improve or increase our reinforcement so that we're shaping the performance that we want. So if a student's working on kicking, for example, and they're planting their non-kicking foot or their support foot next to the ball, but they're making contact with the outside side of their foot, what we would reinforce is that they're landing with their non-kicking foot or with their support foot in the right spot. We don't say anything about the foot placement where they're making contact with the ball necessarily. We're going to reinforce the piece that is correct and then demonstrate again, ask them to try it again, and cue them or prompt them to hit with the right part of the foot. We want to make sure, especially with students with autism spectrum disorder, that we're not reinforcing incorrect form. Schedules are another thing that we use very often, and schedules basically are presenting a task that communicates a series of activities or what are the steps and the pieces that we need to do to complete a task. Regardless of how complex or simple the task is, it should answer the questions for the student. What do I need to be done? What do I need to do? How much needs to be done? When will I be finished? And then what's next, okay? So what you see on the right-hand side is a student who is working with a schedule. And these are simply metal boards, and the components to the schedule are magnets, okay? This can be done with paper and lamination and Velcro. It can be done with tape. I mean, there's a variety of different ways to do it. But what you see is a difference in schedules. The global visual schedule are the icons that are listed there that have warm-up, practice, game time, and cool down. And they are visual representations or global representations that represent an activity. Warm-up won't always be the exact same activities, but the student knows that that picture means I'm about to make my muscles warm by participating in large movements or large muscle activities. Global schedules are for individuals who've learned how to use a schedule and they understand what the picture means. If you have a student who doesn't understand what the picture means, then we might use something like a task schedule, which might be something as simple as those check marks followed by a red box, okay? For most individuals who are being included in general physical education or in community-based programming, a global visual schedule with the picture representations is appropriate. Only if an individual doesn't understand what those pictures mean, or if they're more impacted by their ASD, should we be using a task schedule. Story-based interventions or social stories are also commonly used, and social stories help the students understand what's supposed to happen in a social context and what are the behaviors we should see in those situations. So for example, what should happen when we greet someone? Or how do we handle a situation if all of a sudden there's a surprise and things go differently than what we had planned? Social stories, for that reason, are used prior to or in preparation for a social event rather than after the event. So I might present a story about how to be a good winner and a good loser prior to gameplay. So we'll look at this example, and hopefully I did a good job at contextualizing it for my friends there in India. So I might say for this social story, if I win, I will say yes one time to my coach and my teammates. I will say good game to the other team and my teammates, and I will smile and give high fives, but I will not brag about being the winner. It's a very simple social story, but it gets the message across about what do I do at the end of the game, whether I win or lose. Modeling is one of our final interventions, and modeling interventions rely on either an adult, a video or an animation, or a peer demonstrating a target behavior. And I'll push play on this while I talk to y'all. So the target behavior can be, again, a motor or a social behavior. And what we want the individual with AS to do is to imitate that behavior. So an example would be telling an individual with ASD to watch while you demonstrate the overhand throw, with the expectation that the individual would repeat that behavior and begin overhand throwing on their own, or modeling something like this, which is the forward float. Video models like this are helpful in some contexts because the video model provides the exact same example or the exact same form each time it is viewed by the individual. Another type of modeling we have is peer modeling, and that's probably the most powerful type of modeling, and that's live modeling by an age-appropriate peer. Children with ASD learn social skills best from their neurotypically developing peers. So it's really important for us as teachers and coaches and parents to remember that we're adults, so that I, as an adult female, may not be the most effective person at modeling and teaching a 12-year-old boy how to be an appropriate 12-year-old boy. But a 12-year-old boy, neurotypically developing peer, probably can, okay? We need to help our youth with ASD model appropriate behaviors and be mindful about how important they are in helping their peers with ASD learn social and motor skills. All right, and then finally, exercise. Exercise has most recently been recognized as an evidence-based practice for individuals with ASD. And while jogging, bicycling, and aquatics are some of the most prevalent in the literature, any physical activity intervention like exergaming, drum fit, or yoga can be used to increase exercise exposure. In fact, there's a growing body of work that's focused on the benefits of antecedent exercise, where individuals with ASD participate in exercise prior to participating in a targeted program. And in fact, one of my doctoral students right now is studying the effects of antecedent exercise via Drums Alive on task engagement after the intervention. And she's working with children with ASD. So while we know exercise is an evidence-based practice and can be used to help reduce unwanted target behaviors, what we don't yet know is how much or what dose of exercise will elicit that response. So as it relates to training PEAT majors and developing our physical education and physical activity programs, the how much exercise is needed, particularly of antecedent exercise, has not yet been established, and we don't yet know, but we do know that it is does have a positive impact. All right, so with that, I think I'm out of time, and I will say thank you for your invitation, your time, and your attention, and open it up to any questions.
Dear ma'am, thank you for your session. You can just stop your share, madam. Then only you will be viewed. Madam, now we have 2 to 3 minutes of break. You can just have a breather. I have noted the questions from the audience. So we have around 7 to 8 questions, and there are many questions, but to highlight it, we have noted it. please have a breather. We give you 2 to 5 minutes. It was a good session. I hope it was useful for many of the people, because of this situation, and also there are many questions regarding this situation also, madam. So Dr. Gideon sir.
Yeah, Sati. Can I take my first question?
Can we go for the question and sessions, please?
Yes, with pleasure. Let me take my first question.
Yes, sir. So I have noted many questions. There are many questions. I hope you don't have time for that. But highlight, we have many questions. To start with, you can go, sir. You can carry on.
Thank you.
Madam, are you ready, madam?
I'm not getting the voice. I'm not getting the voice. Actually, you can unmute her.
Yes. Yes, good.
Now
madam.
I can. Okay.
Yeah, madam. Yeah. Madam, Dr. Dillon, really it shows the presentation, it shows you worked hard. According to the Indian context, I can see many places the contents is more relevant for our people. I have 2-3 questions with short, I can tell you. You have mentioned that 40% of the children with ASD with the obese, and compared to the peer groups, their fitness level is very less. And we do have a lot of experience with the parents. They're complaining that bringing to the children that somehow my child is very, not active throughout the day. So then what is, see, now my question is, what type of initially the activities to be started? Anything that I have seen that evidence-based practice where the exercise comes, but I want which should be the initial level after an assessment, which activity will be best to shoot for taking in physical activities, addressing the child need, what is best to start as a physical educator?
So I would say, I'll go back to my comment that behavior is communication. If you have students, for example, who are demonstrating to you that they don't like moving quickly, they want to move only at a slow level, that may be because at an underlying level, the vestibular system is not well developed or not well integrated. So we might look at linear movements or slow swinging movements as opposed to quickly changing movements and rotational movements, but just to get them moving. You can also look at how you can embed opportunities across the day. Yeah. So is there a way for students to help you, or children at home to help you with tasks that would involve movement, that where they'll be moving and being physically active with them without them being mindful that they're actually doing that? So we had a student who liked sorting and organizing things. So what we did with one of the families was we took milk jugs and cartons and things of that nature and filled them with sand and color coded each of them. So we asked him to organize them, and we would put all of them in a very disorganized way on one side of the room and ask him to lift them and carry them and organize them on the other side of the room. So we were working with his interest and with his perseveration on particular types of tasks to help integrate the physical activity. So I'd look at those kinds of things. What is the child telling us via their behavior about how they want to move or how they're able to move? And then how do we leverage that interest into our activities? If you have I worked with a child one time who was very much obsessed with Angry Birds, the cartoon, and another student actually who was very interested in Star Wars. And so we tried to pull those interests into the activities to get them moving. I guess maybe another thing that I would say is physio balls or therapy balls are very good as well. They can be used as chairs while the students are sitting at the desk to increase physical activity if they're able to do it appropriately. It also can, they can lay over the top of it and we can get vestibular activity, proprioceptive if they're bouncing on top of it. I mean, there's a variety of different things we can do with it. We have them roll on the floor with it and lift it so that they're working on their core and their lower body strength or upper body strength, depending on how they're lifting it. and getting multiple uses out of it. So there's a variety of different ways you could start, but I would look first at where, what the student's telling you they might be interested in based on their behaviors.
This one, really, madam, I got it. Madam, one question is, most of the physical educators or the special educators, how they deal with the ASD children, they bring down their hyper level activity. Giving a lot of aerobic activities or task oriented, or asking them to go for few repetitions of climbing the hills or staircases like that. Any evidence is there that this kind of practice impacts or something, it negatively impacts their health of doing such kind of repetitively, giving more stress on the cardio aerobic activities? Do you have any other evidence in that way?
That it would be negative? I want to make sure I understood you correctly.
Because we give more stress physical activities, like asking them to go up staircase or doing a lot of, I could see that many of the people repeating these things, whether the child is desired or not, these people are making it a target to bring them to calm down these things. Do you have any studies have done outcome? Is there anything?
That's a good question. I'm not aware of anything right now where there are negative. Okay, let me say it this way. I don't know physiologically that there's any negative response there, but I would say this. As with any child with or without a disability, we want them as physical educators to enjoy physical activity. We want them to seek it, not to avoid it. So I would say probably it's in our best interest to find a way for the children to be physically active in something that's engaging to them, and then to give them a task where they're just loathing the experience. We don't want that to be the situation. But that does sometimes force us to think very creatively about how we're going to motivate the students to be physically active. Whether it's, I have one middle school student that I work with on a regular basis who very much likes to watch his shows. Well, the parents went so far as to put a little mini trampoline in the living room and to let him work out on the mini trampoline while he's watching one of his programs. And he gets to watch a 30-minute show and do that, but then he has to go away from it. He has to walk away from the screen. He has to walk away from that and do some other things, and then he can come back to it. But they've tied those two things together, so it's a positive experience for him, not a negative experience.
Okay. On the final one, just because when I just talking to many of the special educators, when year long they are dealing with the special children, it is general. I'm asking not only specific to the autism children. When these special educators are dealing with throughout the day with the special children, the complete working hours, and some of the teachers are with the parents of the special children. They sometimes short of time, they are they mentally blocks and they want the space. What kind of suggestions do you want to give for these teachers who are handling the special children? What to be taken, some kind of guidelines in a during period of time? That's
so. Let me make sure I understand the question you're asking me. How do we have some self-preservation for the teachers and for the parents?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'll go back to my example actually of modeling as an evidence-based practice and about teaching our children how to self-manage their own behaviors. And I would be very forthright with the students. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling frustrated. I need to take a break. Model the behavior you would want the students to do. And in some situations, you're able to do that. The other thing that I might say is that for some of our students, it's okay for them to have a few moments of quiet time as well. See if you can engage them in a parallel activity that's quiet and restful for you, or allows you to be more mindful. That is something that they can also do, whether that's calm breathing, or progressive relaxation. We've worked on that with our students with autism spectrum disorder as well. Those kinds of things where you're working in parallel with the student, but it's beneficial to you just as much as it is to them, might be a good place to start.
Thank you. Sati, you can take it.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, sir. Madam, let me put some questions on the audience side. So to start with, is autism manageable or curable? Does it progress by age? This is one of the questions of the participant.
Sure. So I wouldn't. I have a perspective of autism from my years of working with children and adults with autism spectrum disorder that is such that I don't look for or say there's a cure. We don't know that there's a cure for autism, and honestly, I'm not worried about that from a professional perspective. What I want to know is, can I program effectively for this individual with autism spectrum disorder, and can I, when it's appropriate, like as an adolescent and a young adult, can I recruit their input and their feedback into the program so that it's participatory as opposed to me being the decision maker in the process? And I don't know that the autism progresses over time. We don't have data that suggests that. What I would say from a physical activity and physical fitness level, though, is that we know that students with autism spectrum disorder are more likely to become sedentary adults. And with those sedentary behaviors, we will see the onset of secondary health conditions, regression of skill, loss of functionality, things of that nature. So the disease itself is not necessarily progressing, but the students or individual lifestyle decisions and behaviors are influencing their overall health and wellness.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much. The second question is, your ideas, experience with epilepsy and autism.
Epilepsy and autism? Is that what the question was?
Have you handled any kids with epilepsy and autism? Any tips to handle with autistic child who have epilepsy?
I don't know that I've ever worked with any kids who have autism spectrum disorder and epilepsy. However, having said that, I have worked with a good number of students who get very anxious about situations and need to communicate to the adults around them that things are getting scary for them or they're getting overly anxious. And what I do know about epilepsy is there's very often an aura that students or the individuals experience prior to the seizure. And if the student can communicate in some way or another that they're feeling those feelings, whether it's the smell or they get a particular sensation, then if they have a way to communicate that to an individual, that would be very helpful. And that's a behavior that can be taught. And there's a good number of supports that we could put in place to have that happen, whether it's the student sits down in a particular position or they hand you a card, or we have some individuals, teachers, paraeducators, parents that wear like a bracelet that has cards on it, and the student can point to the one that says, I'm not feeling well, or I think I'm about to have a seizure, and communicate that if they don't have expressive language.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. So now, next is important question. So now it is COVID-19, as you know about the situation. Please give some tips for the parents because they are not professionals, please.
Yes.
Because to handle the kids in the house, kids in the house, please give some tips.
So I'm not sure, but I think if I recall correctly from my conversations with folks in India, that your schools are not open at all right now, correct?
Yes,
they are all closed down.
Yes.
Okay. Here in the United States, we have a mix of schools being closed and being virtual versus those that are face-to-face or hybrid. I will say this, students with autism spectrum disorder have less anxiety and are able to more independently function when they know what's coming next. So we need to provide them with those details. So that global visual schedule that I showed you earlier, where there was a sequence of these are the things that are going to happen, I would be implementing that at home as well. So that you can put in order, we have to do this, then we have to do this, then we have to do this, then we're going to take a break. And as the parents, you get to take a break while the child is also taking a break. And then re-implement another schedule. And it doesn't have to be fancy. If your child is a reader, use short word phrases that put in order, this is what we're going to do, whether it's a global visual schedule or a checklist where the students themselves can check off, yes, I've done these things, or no, I haven't. And I would be repeating that throughout the day. The other thing is if you have a student or a child with autism spectrum disorder that has certain sensory needs, that we provide those sensory breaks throughout the day as well, so that they're getting those needs met.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. To add to the question, just an extension is, my kid is mobile addict. Please give me some tips. He is an autism. He is addict for the mobile. So how to take our situation, madam?
Say that one more time. I'm not understanding that one part.
My kid is autistic. He, due to COVID-19 scenario, he is in the house. He plays with the mobile, cell phone. How to get rid of this?
All about the electronics. Yes. Okay. So go back to the clipboard. Have the student work for the time on the device. Okay. And if it's the situation, because we've been in this since March, right? At least we have here in the United States. I know, I think you all were right there with us. At this point in time, the student probably, or the child probably says, it's my device, I get it when I want it. And decreasing the amount of time that the student's going to be on it will be a challenge at first. What I always tell my physical education majors, and what I would tell this parent, is that as we implement a behavior management technique, it is more likely that the challenging behavior will increase before it decreases. So be ready for that. And then I would look to have the student have to do 1 or 2 or 3 things before they can get the device, and then set a visual timer. So, and there's lots of, speaking of phones and mobile phones and apps and iPads, there's a lot of visual timer apps that show a circle, and the circle disappears or fills in as the timer goes. Let the child have the device for that period of time, and then ask them to repeat the task. And it may be at first that you have to give them very small, what are going to feel like menial tasks, and then give them a lot of time with a visual timer, and then eventually reverse that progression so that it's more tasks and more time away from the device and a smaller window of time that they actually have to work for.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. And hope almost come to the end. This question is, your idea, because you installed physio ball, that is Basu ball and physio ball. Your idea on vestibular therapy or stimulation, is it good for them? Vestibular therapy or stimulation?
If the student is telling you through their behaviors that they're seeking or craving vestibular stimulation, then we need to be able to provide that to them in a way that's socially appropriate, but addresses and honors that need that they're communicating. So I would be a proponent for providing them with, and we have, they look like Bosu balls would be another one, both sides up. It's like a half moon. There's also pads you can buy that are little, like physio balls that the students can sit on in their chair. They can wiggle around it, and it's feeding all of those needs and desires. Swinging, running, playing on playground equipment, rolling, all of those things are going to feed the vestibular system.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. So we have the last question. Now we have the last question, ma'am. So it's from one of the participants, Dr. E. Saravanan. So please have the question, please.
Madam, how far the yoga practices are utilized for the ASD children? And is there any adapted yoga procedures are recommended for the follow for the ASD children? Is there any practice?
So you're asking, is there any particular programs that have been developed specifically for adapted yoga for children with ASD?
Yeah.
That's the question?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know one off the top of my head that I would say this is a great program, you should do this, because there's so many that have actually been developed. I would say this, there is a There are 3 or 4 that I am aware of that I'm happy to send forward the links for, the programming information for. The other thing is there are a good number of apps, Google or Apple apps that are available that include things like, that include adapted yoga for children that are very beneficial. And our students, because of that visual component, our students with ASD are very often drawn to those visual programs that could be implemented in times like this with COVID. There's also a good number of videos that are available online that have been developed. But just off the top of my head to say one, I couldn't tell you, but there are a good number of them. There's also an app called Exercise Buddy that includes not necessarily yoga, but strengthening activities that are somewhat similar to some of our yoga poses. But adapted yoga is something that's actually quite popular with our young children with ASD. We use it on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Dear
Thank you.
ma'am, in Texas University, that is Texas Women's University, do you practice yoga, ma'am? Do you encourage yoga, or do you have any sessions on yoga?
Yes, and my student, okay, so I'm going to say that we do the American version of yoga, for lack of a better term. We're doing many of the exercises and focus on breathing, but it is not for all of our students or our students in the public schools. We are not getting to the level of mindfulness we should be. It is not has not taken on a spiritual, if you will, tone. But I will say that many of our students, in fact, my students taught yoga last night to our adults with autism spectrum disorder. We very often include yoga as either a part of our introductory activities or our closing activities for our youngsters, so that we can help them understand where is one body part in comparison to another and how does my body move. And then for our older individuals with autism spectrum disorder, our secondary students and post-secondary students or adults, we look at yoga and the benefits for physical fitness and doing more intensive yoga sequences. So yes, it's absolutely a part of what we program with. Okay, sure. I'm happy for that, and we are happy to have you here again. So we officially end today's, that is day 1 webinar session of the inclusive adapted physical education. So I like to thank the great speaker we had today among us, Dr. Dylan. The speech was very wonderful, informative, and hope there are many takeaway messages. Dear Dr. R. Giridharan sir, HOD of our faculty, your end notes, please. Your end notes, please, sir.
Really, madam, it's really a wonderful session we had, and we hope the audience will take the sessions activities, whatever they suggested by your in your content. Definitely, we will assure you that this will be implemented in our curriculum, and whatever in the previous our mission RKMVERI missions curriculum also, where you have suggested infusion in your module, that sure we will take it. Really, madam, we are really we enjoyed this session and very informative. I'm thankful. Thank you.
Dear, thank you,
very
sir.
Good.
And
thank you for the invitation. Much appreciated.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. And hope so your experience is much more in various committees. In the near future, we will like to invite you for our committees also. Please be kind enough to join the committee, ma'am. We will intimate you.
That will be.
Okay.
That will be wonderful. And thank you to your audience for their positive comments and wonderful questions. I greatly appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Appreciation for all of them. Thank you. We officially end this session. So the participants can leave session, and please come tomorrow on the same time, 9:30. We will be having the session of day 2. Thank you so much for the participants.
Okay.
So, dear participants, we end the session today. Tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. we will send you the link. Please make sure you join at time, following the same code of ethics as followed today. Thank you for your cooperation. On behalf of Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute, Faculty of General and Adaptive Education and Yoga, we wholeheartedly thank you, the speaker, the organizing committee, and all for organizing this event very fruitfully. Thank you so much. So we see you tomorrow. We end this session. Thank you so much.